Okay, let's just focus our attention for a bit, set a positive motivation, do some short prayers, and then yeah, embark on our final session of this series of this module on emptiness. Mm. So focus your mind on an object of placement meditation for a minute or so. Mm. And then visualize yourself surrounded by all sentient beings, beginning with your mother and father to your left and right, and those whom you have a supportive connection with or naturally have affection for. Imagine to your left and right and behind you. And those you tend to have aversion for and dislike towards. Imagine seated directly in front, facing towards you. And then all the other sentient beings of the six realms, imagine in human form seated all around you. Mm. And remember how you're, from life to life, you're interconnected with them without end, and how all of them are the same as you, yourself, in wishing to have well being and happiness, and fundamentally wishing to be free from suffering and causes of suffering. Mm. And then, yeah, generate a positive motivation for this session. If you can, a bodhicitta motivation. Yeah, recognizing the faults of self cherishing, the benefits of cherishing others, and then generate a personal responsibility to free others from suffering. And for that purpose, try to think, yeah, therefore, I myself must become enlightened. In order to become enlightened, I must realize emptiness. And therefore, I'll engage in this session. And then, if you like, visualize the field of refuge, the space in front with Shakyamuni Buddha at the center. And we can recite these prayers. Compelled by great compassion, you taught the sacred Dharma to dispel all wrong views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Do not commit any unwholesome actions. Engage in perfect wholesome actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Mm. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all transmigratory beings enjoy this pure land. Yedam Guru Rana Mandala Kanira Tayami. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits from explaining the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my two collections from explaining the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my two collections from explaining the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Okay. So, thought tonight what we'll do is go through again. I think just I'll talk through again this 4-point analysis. We pretty much meditated on all of it between last week and the week before that. But I'll just talk through it again. Check if you have any questions about any parts of it. And then once we clear those up, then we'll meditate kind of briefly through the entire analysis again. Yeah, and try to come to the conclusion of the total absence of the inherently existent self, a person, and then abide in that kind of spacious awareness for some time. And then I received some questions by email. I'll try to clear those, address those questions and any other questions you have. And then we'll see how much time there's time left. Okay, so let's look at these slides again about the selflessness of person. Of course, in if you divide up, there's the selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomena. So the selflessness of person is the emptiness as it exists as a property of a person, right? And then selflessness of phenomena is emptiness as it exists as when it exists as a property of something other than a person. Although usually when we meditate on emptiness of phenomena, then is usually talking about the emptiness of our body or mind or parts of the body and mind. Because those, like our body is not a person, right? It's part of a person. Just like a beam in a house or one wall of a house is not a house. It's just part of the house, right? So, and why do we, when we meditate on selflessness of person, why is it we usually meditate on the selflessness of the parts of a person, like their body or their mind or parts of those, rather than something outside, like a house or a wall or a tree or something, is because it's most important to meditate on emptiness in relation to the things that we grasp at the most strongly as existing from their own side. So it often happens that even if we can reduce our grasping at our own ego, that we instinctively then grasp at our body existing from its own side, or our mind existing from its own side, or emptiness itself existing from its own side. But but of course, when we meditate on emptiness of person, it is also important to meditate on the emptiness, especially the things we generate afflictive emotions in relation to, like the objects of our attachment might be other people, or you know, I don't know, other things, or objects of our, yeah, objects of our anger as well, objects of attachment or objects of anger. It's important to meditate on those objects, whether they're people or things other than people, like money or power or fame. We can also meditate on the emptiness of those, like the emptiness of money of existing from its own side, or fame of being desirable from its own side, would also be meditation on selflessness of phenomena. So we're not going to get to do much meditation on selflessness of phenomena because we're just running out of time. Um, and but of the two, selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomena, selflessness of person is considered more easy to realize. And there's probably two main reasons. One is because we are a person, so we're very intimately familiar with all how we exist, right? And all the parts of us. So when we analyze, it's very easy to look at in a very detailed and personal way because we're a person. Um, but also, probably another reason it's a bit easier to realize the selflessness of person as opposed to selflessness of phenomena is because there is a very obvious difference between like the um, the kind of person we grasp at as existing, and its basis of imputation, basically. So the basis of imputation of a person is what? Do you remember? Like this term, the basis of imputation, meaning there's something based upon which we impute person. So think about in relation to yourself, when you impute I, what's the basis upon which you impute I? Like, is it this building or something? Or a tree? No, right? What's the basis upon which, or the collection of parts upon which we impute
His
I?
body
Our body is part of it, yeah, and
and mind.
parts of our body and our mind. Yeah, basically our body and our mind, the collection of body and mind. But sometimes it's more one and sometimes it's more the other. Like, if someone calls you on the phone and like you're on a walk, you're walking outside, someone calls you on the phone and asks, "What are you doing?" Then you say, "Oh, I'm going for a walk, I'm walking on the beach." At that time, are you I mean, at that time, you're primarily observing your body, right? Because it's your body that's walking. Of course, your mind is involved, it's not uninvolved, right? But it's mainly your body that's walking. So we primarily, at that time, when we're doing physical movements and think about, oh, I'm doing this, I'm walking, I'm sitting, I'm lying, I'm washing or something, then we're primarily observing our body and then imputing I on the body and thereby labeling I'm walking, right? Whereas when, um, other times we might be thinking deeply about something or imagining something or remembering something in the past. And then when we say, oh, I remember this, like in a conversation, oh, I just remembered this, then we're primarily observing something that's happening with our mind, not our body. And then we're labeling I on the basis of that that's happening with our mind. So sometimes, in general, the body and mind, they're both the basis of the imputation. But sometimes we observe more the body and sometimes more the mind, and then label I. Um, oh, so so within the selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomena, it's for most people, it's easier to realize the selflessness of person. And one reason, like I already said, is because we're very intimately familiar with ourself. So when we analyze, it becomes very powerful, right? More powerful than if we think about some other person, right? Or something else than us. But also, there's a big difference between how we feel we exist as a person and the basis of imputation of us as a person, the body and mind. It's quite easy to see when we, in this first step, remember in the four steps of the analysis, in the first step, we think of a situation where there's a strong sense of I and look at how it appears. Like when someone accuses us of doing something wrong, or we're suddenly the object of many people's attention, or we suddenly feel fear or irritation or something, then the I arises strongly. So, and it appears just naturally as if it exists independently from its own side. So it's quite easy to see that then when we search for that person, trying to find it either within the aggregates or outside the aggregates, because the aggregates, the body and mind, they're so very different from that person. The way that the I instinctively appears is very different from the aggregate. So it's quite easy to see that it's not any of the aggregates, right? Whereas for some other things, it's more difficult to see. Like, you know, like if you analyze to find, well, even like the body, if we were to analyze our body to see how, our own body appears to exist from its own side as something that possesses all these parts, and then try to find that inherently existent body, you do the same analysis, right? For if, whether you're meditating on the selflessness of person or selflessness of phenomena, all these parts of the analysis are the same, right? It's just you just have to change slightly, but the main steps are the same. Identifying the object of negation, identifying the two possibilities, being certain about two possibilities, seeing that the thing you're looking for is not one with its parts. In the relation to the person, we say the aggregates, but you could think of just its parts or its basis of imputation, that it's not one with those, and then it's not different from those. So, like in relation to the body, for instance, when we do that, we observe, how the body seems to exist from its own side. And then, well, the body, my body must be one with if it inherently exists, it must be one with all the parts, the collection of parts of the body, or different from those, right? And then then the third step is to analyze whether it's one, the inherently existent body is one with its parts. But there, see, it's a bit more difficult than relation to the person because the body is something physical and all the parts of the body are also something physical. So they're quite similar, right? So it's a bit more difficult to see. And the same with the mind, right? It's a bit more difficult because the thing that's imputed and the basis of imputation, they're more similar. So it's a bit more difficult to see how they can't be one, right? Whereas with the person, as a person, we're something quite different, quite obviously different from our body and different from our mind. Um, yeah. Anyway, that's a bit of a subtle point, but I thought I'd just throw it out there because to explain why we're in this, especially in these last 6 weeks, we're focusing on meditating on the selflessness of the person rather than the selflessness of phenomena because it's easier to realize. But the method of doing this 4-point analysis is the same. Um, okay, so let's go through the 4-point analysis. Just briefly, kind of talk through it as kind of a reminder. Yeah, so first of all, I'll just start with this verse by Nagarjuna again, because it's really excellent verse, and His Holiness encouraged us to meditate on it. So here, yeah, in the first verse here, Nagarjuna is talking about meditation on the selflessness of persons, and in the second verse, he's talking about meditation on selflessness of phenomena. All right. So first he says, a person is not earth, water, fire. Is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not consciousness, and not all of them. What person is there other than these? So, so in the very first phrase, a person, there we have to identify the person we're looking for. It's not just the ordinary person. Um, I mean, it's not the person which is a dependently arising phenomena that exists. It's rather the person as we appear naturally to ourselves, especially yeah, when we're not analyzing, right? That is, and there's this appearance of just independent and independently existent or concretely, solidly existent person that exists, yeah, by it from its own power or by it from its own side, right? So that's what it's talking about. So that person is not earth, and think of the different elements that compose one's body and mind, right? So it's not the earth element of our body, it's not the water element of the body, it's not the fire element of the body, not the wind element of the body, it's not space, and also it's not the mind, right? It's not our mind, and it's not all of them that group together, right? And that one's a little difficult. Like oftentimes we get hung up there, um, thinking that, well, all the parts of body and mind together, they're kind of connected together in such a way that they function as I do as a person, that's the I. But the reason that's not the I is because that's a collection of parts, right? And when the I appears to us, it doesn't appear like a collection of parts. It appears like just one individual homogeneous thing, right? And that's the one we're looking for, right? Also, because that whole collection of parts is something that we possess. It's it's there. It's like all the parts of my body, all the parts of my mind. When we think of I, we don't think of the parts we possess. We think of the one who possesses all those parts. The part possessor, it's called, right? The owner of the body and mind. So that's also why that collection of the whole collection of parts is not the I, because that's a whole collection of things possessed by the I. That belongs to the I. The I is the one who owns them, right? And so that's how it appears, right? Yeah, those are the two main reasons. So he's saying, yeah, the person is not any, of the parts of the person, not earth and so forth, up to not consciousness. It's also not that whole collection of parts. And then, so that's all in relation to actually the third, in the 4-point analysis, it relates to the third point. We'll come back to that. And then this last line relates to the fourth point. What person other than these? So then he asks, well, what person is there other than my body and mind? If you put my body and mind off to one side of the room and look somewhere else, what is there you can point to say this is the person? There's nothing, right? Because the body and mind, this collection of parts of the body and mind, are the basis of imputation of person. We always impute person upon this collection of body and mind. Think, like for yourself, do you ever observe something other than your body and mind and label I on that, right? Maybe your reflection in a mirror. That's about as close as you come. No?
I think it's
But
also
that's a reflection of the body and mind. Yes, I hear someone's voice online, I think.
oh no, I think it's also the label, the roles and the labels that we put upon ourselves that um like the roles that we play, sister, mother, wife,
Mhm.
daughter.
Yeah, but when you label like I'm this kind of wife, I'm this kind of daughter, are
Mhm.
you ever observing something other than your body and mind? You're not observing your body and mind at all, and you're observing something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think we identify our, I mean, maybe wrongly identify ourselves as, oh, we are a good, a bad something, or a bad daughter, maybe, or a bad daughter-in-law, or a good friend, So
Mm.
is that, so we wrongly label ourselves, I think.
No, that's
In,
okay. You can wrongly label, but think when you label like I'm a good daughter or I'm a bad daughter or
Mhm.
something, are you
Mhm.
observing yourself or you're observing something other than you?
Yeah, we're only observing ourselves, or I observe myself.
And
Yeah.
that's the point. Whenever we label I, like I'm this or I'm that or I'm good or I'm bad or I'm a,
Mm,
I'm an accountant or I'm a lawyer or I'm a
yeah,
student or I'm a parent or something,
right.
the question is, aren't we always observing some part of our body or mind, right? Some
Yes.
part of our aggregates and not some other person's body or mind or something other than us.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm asking you to ask the question. I'm not saying like come to a foregone conclusion because yeah, there is some doubt about it, but it does seem like that. I mean, that's why our body and mind are the basis of imputation for us as a person, and nothing else is. So, but that's part of the meditation. We'll come back to it. This is the fourth step in the 4 point analysis. This is the fourth point of the fourth step. To look at try to check if we imagine putting our body and mind off, like in the closet or something, and shut the door, and then look somewhere else to point to something else upon which not only we can label I, but we point to it and say that is the I. You can't find anything, right? But that's part of the meditation is to check if you can find something else. Okay, so I know this is maybe I have to be careful with time because can't spend too long on this verse. I explained this verse already, but that's what it's talking about in the fourth line. What person is there other than all these parts of the person? And then in the second verse, um, he's speaking about um, meditation on self as a person. So he says, just as the person is not real, due to being a composite of six constituents, these six constituents are earth, water, fire, wind, space, consciousness, and consciousness. No. Because the person is made up of all parts, then it doesn't exist from its own side. It's not real because it's something that exists independence upon those parts and labeling I upon those parts, right? So just as the person is not real due to being a composite of six constituents, so each of those constituents also is not real due to being a composite. Like the earth element of our body also doesn't exist from its own side because it's also made up of parts, and we label earth element upon those parts. Or you could think, your head also, like or the body, the whole body, it also doesn't exist from its own side, even though it appears like that, because it's made of constituents. We label my body upon all these different, the appendages, the arms, the torso, the skin, the bones, all these different parts we label. And each of those parts is like that all the way down. Whatever you imagine or look at, it's something made up of parts, right? Whether physical parts or like consciousness, it has different aspects of it or moments in time or different instances of it. So there's all different ways to understand the parts of things. Yeah. So okay. So that's this verse. So now let's look at these 4 points in brief and then meditate. How many? Already half hour's gone. So the first. So just to, I changed the wording a little bit. I don't know if you noticed from last week to try to make it a bit more clear. But the 4 points here are A, B, C, and D. The 4 point of the analysis. So A is recognizing the object to be refuted or negated. So you remember that we've done this many times now. I think all the way from the first session, where we imagine a situation where the sense of I strongly arises, right? And so yeah, that's the first point. Then the second point, and this is probably for most people, this is one of the more difficult ones, is gaining certainty about the full set of possibilities. So the full set of possibilities is like this. If the I exists independently as a real concrete thing, not imputed by the mind, not dependent upon parts or causes and conditions, just real, having its own inherent kind of nature. If it exists like that, then it must exist in one of two ways. Either as something that's one with our aggregates, with the collection of our body and mind, or different from those, right? There's only two possibilities. And again, the reasoning for this is because in relation to one object, and so here I'll take the clock. I think I used this clock before for this purpose. In relation to any one object, right? Whether it's you or, the clock or the house or anything. Everything that exists in the world is either one with this clock or separate from this clock. And that's true in relation to any object. If you take any one object, you can divide everything else in the world into things that are either one with that object or different from that object. Those are the only two possibilities. There's no third possibility. Because something cannot be both one with the clock and different from it, and it can't be neither, right? Just do it as a thought experiment for a minute. Like only this clock is one with itself, right? Only this clock is not different from it. Everything else that exists is different from it, right? Can you think of something that's not included in one of those two possibilities? One with the clock or different from the clock? And this is, for those who are in exploring Buddhism, this is why we talk about one and different. One of the big reasons why it's so important. We were just talking about this last night in exploring Buddhism. What does it mean to be one thing versus different, right? And then one with something versus different from something, right? Yeah. Does that make sense? That everything else in the world, because this is important idea. That you might just check your own understanding. Like come up with your own example of one thing, right? And then check, okay, is that thing one with itself, meaning it exists and it's not different from itself, right? Anything that exists is one with itself, right? So just take your own example of a thing, anything, right? And check first, is that thing one with itself, meaning it's not different from itself? Yes. Okay. And then everything else that exists, is it different from that thing or one with it? Mm. And so it's easy to see, like if it's easier to see how things unrelated to that, like in relation to the clock, it's easy to see how like the pillar or the wall or the light bulb, something that's very different, those things are different from the clock. But even like the hands on the face of the clock, are those the clock? No, they're part of the clock. So they're different from the clock. Even though they're part of the clock, they're not one with the clock because they're different from it. Because they're hands of a clock. They're not a clock, right? Even the weight of the clock, it's part of the clock, but it's not the clock. And so it's different, right? So that's a bit more difficult to see, the parts of this. So now with your own, whatever example you're using, think of not only things that are obviously other than it or unrelated to it, but even the parts of that thing, how they're not that thing that you have in mind. And this is very important because this is part of the analysis of the person, right? This is what we're doing. So can you see especially how even the parts of the thing that you're thinking of, they are also not one with that thing because they're different from it, because they're parts of it. The thing, whatever thing you're thinking of, it possesses those parts. And so the thing that possesses the parts and the parts are different. Okay. So this is the reasoning behind the second step. The gaining certainty about the full set of two possibilities. The two possibilities meaning in relation to the meditation on emptiness of a person, that the person that we're looking for, that appears so clearly in the first step, to exist from their own side. As we look for them, we have to be, as we look for this person, we have to be certain that if it exists, it exists in one of only two ways. Either one with the collection of aggregates, it either is that collection of aggregates, or it's something different from them, right? Because everything that exists is either one with this collection of aggregates or different from them. Just like everything that exists is either one with this clock or different from the clock. It's that reasoning, or using your own example. Okay, so that's the second step. And if you have a question about it, just hold it in mind till we just look briefly at the third and fourth steps, and then I'll take any questions altogether. So then the third step, analyzing whether the person and the aggregates can be inherently the same, right? So remember, we're looking for an inherently existent person. So if it's the same, if it's one with the aggregates or the same as the aggregates, it has to be inherently the same with the aggregates. If it's inherently the same with the aggregates, it means it would be identical to them in every way. And so the person is not that because, one, the aggregates, the collection of our body and mind, is a collection of parts, right? The person, as it appears, the inherently existent person, is not a collection of parts. It's just one thing. And then, so either the person would have to be many things, as the aggregates are, or the aggregates would have to be one thing, as the person is. Also, it would have to be that whenever the person arises, the I arises to our mind, the aggregates arise. The aggregates appear to the mind. But it's not the case. In the first step, in the situations we're thinking of, it's not that our aggregates arise, just a sense of I, all on its own arises. It's not the aggregates appear. Um, and then also, I mean, we can also see how the I is not, it's not the body and not the mind, right? Because the I is not exclusively something, it's not the body because it's not exclusively something physical. It has a mind, whereas our body doesn't have a mind. And the I is not the mind because it's not exclusively just consciousness or awareness. It's not exclusively mind. It also has a body, whereas our mind doesn't have a body. Mm. Um, and then also another reason it's not. So that's the second reason. A third reason that the I is not inherently one with the aggregates is because the aggregates are part of the I, and the I is the one that possesses those parts, right? That's another reason, which we already discussed. And then a fourth reason is that because when these aggregates, at the time of death, when our body separates from our mind separates from our body, and the parts of the body become kind of scattered and disintegrate, that time the I, it doesn't end, it continues, right? Um, so if the I was inherently one with the aggregates, then it would come to an end when the aggregates dissipate and come to an end. Um, but it doesn't. So that's the fourth reason. So here in this third step, that's where the most reasons fall. There's many different reasonings here. There's more also than what I mentioned now. Maybe when we meditate, I'll mention some more. Um, yeah, yeah. So that's kind of the main reasonings of this third step. Why the I is not inherently one with the aggregates. Mm. Maybe a fifth reason, maybe it's good to mention this reason now, since I mentioned it in several contexts lately, just to remind you of it. This reasoning Lama Zopa Rinpoche would use a lot, is that if the I was inherently one with the aggregates, then whenever the aggregates appear, the I has to appear, because they're the same thing, essentially. They would be the same thing if they're inherently one thing. So whenever the aggregates appear, the I would already have to appear. But that's not the way it happens. is rather it happens that we can see in our own experience that first, I mean, it's very quick, but if you look carefully, you can see how first the aggregates appear, and then on that we label I. Like in this example, what I gave, when if you're imagine walking along the beach and someone calls you and asks, what are you doing? In a flash of a moment, we recognize, we observe like, oh well, I'm on the beach and walking, right? And then we label I'm walking, right? So first the body appears, and then we label I, right? But if the aggregates or when if someone asks, in another context, what you're doing, and we say, oh, I'm thinking about something. In a first moment, actually, our thinking, our process of thinking appears, and then we label I on that, right? Um, so if the I and the aggregates were the same, there wouldn't be any gap. Like there wouldn't be, our body or mind appearing and then labeling upon that. It would just, it's like the body itself would appear as the I, right? Or the mind itself would appear as I, because they would be the same thing. So that's another reason. Anyway, so by going through this reasoning, though, what we come with the conclusion we're supposed to come to, right, is that the what appears to be the inherently existent I, it cannot be one with the aggregates. It's not the same as the aggregates. It's clearly something different from them, right? For all the reasons I just gave. And then we go to the fourth analysis, and then we check, well, if it's something different from them, then I should be able to find it, right? Because if it inherently exists, if it exists in the way it appears, then as I zoom into it, on it, it should be clearer and clearer. I should be able to find it. But when we look, so then in the fourth step, D here, analyzing whether the person and the aggregates can be inherently different. When we look, so this is when we imagine putting like our body and mind off to one side or in a closet, and then we look somewhere else for the I and try to identify something other than. Because if it exists in the way it appears in step one, as something that exists independently from the body and mind and owns and controls my body and mind, but is not reducible to them, then we should be able to find that kind of thing, right? Independently of the body and mind, we should be able to find I, but we can't, right? And so that's where we end up with, because of being certain in the second step, well, if this I exist in the way it appears, it must be either one with the body and mind or different from the body and mind. That's the full set of possibilities. And then we look in C here, the third step. It's not one with the body and mind, the aggregates. And then D, it's not separate from those. And therefore, the only conclusion is it doesn't exist. What appeared in the first step was just an illusion. It doesn't exist. And that's where that's where we just try to abide in that recognition of, by this very clear kind of logical process of analysis, the conclusion that the I does not exist, even one atom or one moment in the way that it ordinarily appears, right? And to just rest in that emptiness of the self existing from its own side, and try to become familiar with that. So that's the process. So now, any questions about any of those steps before we meditate on it? Kate.
I'm thinking I am having a hard time with when you said, is there anything that is different than if it's one or different? And then I was like, well, what if it's a part? And I know you said even parts are different, but I don't want to say I'm not convinced by you, which I am convinced by you, but is there a way to get outside the thinking that if something is a part of something, that I can understand why it's not one, but I feel resistance to saying it's different. Do you know? So like how do you get out of that thinking And I
Hmm.
suppose it'd say, yes, it seemed reasonable to me when we just looked at either you're the cup or not the cup. But then when you ask the question, can you find anything different? I think the parts were the harder one to see as different.
They are. It is harder to see how the parts are different because they're so intimately related to the thing that they're part of, right? So it seems like, but they're not different from that because they're part of it, right? But here, I mean, yeah, you have to, I don't know. We have to kind of in a way it's like not mix the way we ordinarily think about what different means and realize that different is being used here in quite a precise way to mean not one with something,
Is it
right?
a, I thought perhaps that I'm thinking of it as not separate. And that is a different definition than not different. Isn't
That's
that?
very different. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, don't think of different as being mean it's to be different from something means to be separate from it or unconnected to it. That's not what it means. Here, yeah, again, it's like here one and different are being kind of used in a yeah, a bit of a precise way. To be one with something, basically meaning to be identical to that thing, right? It's not it's not different from it in any way whatsoever. So like the part of the say even a cup, you mentioned a cup. No, is that your example? So even like a cup, say the base of the cup, the bottom side. Like a cup has a cylindrical, if it's a round cup, let's just assume it's a round cup. If it's a cylindrical part, it has a lip, it has a base. That so it can sit flat on the table. So even like the base of the cup is not the cup, right? It's not one with the cup. It's part of the cup. Um, and one easy way to think of, I mean, I don't know, easy way. It feels easy to me, but I'm not sure it feels easy to you. But is that because think the cup is the thing that possesses the base of the cup. The base of the cup is the base of the cup because it's part of the cup. It's a part that belongs to the cup. It can't be one with the cup because the cup is the thing that has that part, right? So it's very different. Yeah. And anything that has parts, it's like that. There's the relationship between the part and the part possessor. And that understanding is very important for doing this analysis um, of yeah, how the person is different from the body and mind in the aggregates. Because the person is the part possessor and all the body and the mind are parts of that, right? Okay. Madhu.
Um, there was one thing that I was struggling with. Um, let's say I identify myself in a situation with an obscuration, such as I was angry in that situation, right? But anger as an emotion doesn't define me. It only appeared at that time,
Hmm.
and at time at that time plus let's say 10 minutes later on, I brought in, let's say, an antidote, let's say patience or compassion,
Hmm.
and the anger immediately reduced. A does that even does time as an element play any role in the aggregates of who I am, or is that irrelevant completely?
I mean, time is always there. It's always like it's just part of our existence. So yeah, it's part of the aggregates. I
And
mean, it's part of the aggregates and like I mean, the aggregates like our body and mind and us as a person, we exist through time, right?
right,
We don't exist kind of outside of time
but those
really.
aggregates change over time.
Yeah. Yeah, time, I mean, time is basically like a measure of change. If
Hmm.
nothing was changing in the universe, there would be no way to detect time. There would be essentially no time if there wasn't change.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So accepting that those aggregates will change, and therefore who I am will also change. Is that a foregone conclusion? I keep scratching my head about that.
Uh, I mean, it's just a fact. If we just observe what's happening, like change is happening, no?
Yeah, because body
And
changes,
it's
aggregates change,
inevitable.
mind. Yeah, it's
Mind
inevitable.
is
So,
changing. Yeah. Yeah.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's another reason. I mean, that's one way to also to refute the grasping at an inherently existent self, right? Because if there was like a self, an I, a person that existed independently without depending upon anything else, as it appears to, no,
Mm,
then it wouldn't be able to change through time
right.
because change requires interaction with, it requires something, you know, in a successive moment being something that it wasn't before, right? So it requires being influenced by things. And even in your example, like if we inherently existed, we wouldn't be able to react to others and get angry, and then later become more patient and apply antidotes. You know, we wouldn't. There wouldn't be that kind of interaction between things. If there was some kind of essential soul that, you know, that as a person we were, that is exists, has its own independent entity, right? That exists completely from its own side.
Mm,
There would be some unchanging essence of how we are. And that's how kind of how we feel often. There is some kind of unchanging essence of who I am. But what Buddhism is, yeah, is, I mean, is unique in all the world religions. Well, more or less. I mean, maybe I can't say authoritatively, but in rejecting that, saying there is no, that's an illusion. But anyway, that's maybe enough talk. We want to make sure we have time to meditate. If there's any other pressing questions, I'll ask. And I mean, I can try to address in a very brief way. But you all look ready to meditate, I think. Okay. So make sure, yeah, you're not, yeah, refresh yourself a little bit. No, I don't want to be falling asleep together with a big group of people. For the first time, because of we went back to standard time. So when I was leaving my house, I have to travel like an hour to get here. For the first time, it was already dark when I left my house today, and I was driving in the dark like the whole way here. So, yeah. So refresh yourself a bit and then we'll meditate. My clock on the table here still says 9 o'clock already. Mm, adjust it. Oh. Max, can you adjust this clock later on? Not now. Now I know. No need to do it now. Okay. Let's yeah, get comfortable. Mm. So gradually, yeah, gradually settle into your meditation posture and turn your attention inwards and focus on your mind or your breath. It can also help, at the outset of a meditation to make a request for inspiration. So, yeah, if you have a connection with, if you have refuge in Buddha Dharma Sangha, or if you have connection with a spiritual teacher of any tradition, or some belief in some higher power or enlightened beings, then yeah, if you like, make a request from your heart that they guide you and inspire you, kind of assist you in your meditation on emptiness. Mm. So then the first step of the 4-point analysis, the first point is recognizing the object of negation. So here the object of negation is the I appearing as it naturally or spontaneously does to exist from its own side. So it's helpful at the beginning to vividly remember a situation when the sense of I very strongly arose. So one type of situation is where someone's accusing us of doing something wrong, especially if it's falsely accusing us and we feel defensive or outraged. But also, just when we get irritated, angry, worried, whenever a strong afflictive emotion arises, even arrogant pride, then the I, appears more strongly. Mm. So look at one situation, whatever works well for you, and try to vividly imagine being in that situation again. And then with a corner of the mind, observe how the sense of I, sense of self, appears in that moment. Mm. So as we do the later parts of the analysis, the second, third, and fourth, oftentimes you'll probably lose a sense of what you're looking for. So when that happens, come back to this first step and repeat it briefly to generate the sense of I again that are looking for. Make it clearly appear to the mind again. And so the second step then is to be clear about the full set of two possibilities. That if the I, the self, exists in this way it appears, it must either be one with the aggregates, this collection of all the parts of my body and mind that are the basis of imputation. It must be one with those, inherently one with those, or inherently different. from those. So check that understanding in your mind, or generate that understanding to whatever way, in whatever way makes it clear for yourself. Mm. And then again, if you lose sense of what you're looking for, thinking about, go back to the first step. And think of a situation where the sense of I arises strongly. Another way to get the I to arise is just to look at the present moment and just think to yourself, like, what am I doing? Who's meditating? It's a bit more subtle and difficult to get a clear picture, but that also works in any moment. Mm. So now we'll go to the third step. So if the I, checking if this I is one with the aggregates, is inherently one with the aggregates. So if it exists in the way it appears from its own side, and from its own side, it must be either one with the aggregates or different from the aggregates. So is it one with the aggregates? If it's inherently one with the aggregates, it has to be completely identical to them, not different in the slightest. However, the aggregates are, when we think of the aggregates, the collection of our body and mind, all the parts of our body and mind, what appears to the mind is a collection of different parts. What appears when we think of the I is not a collection. It just looks like one solid thing. So it's not the same thing. Also, all the parts of our body and mind are parts of the I, parts of the person, whereas the person, the I, is the possessor of those parts. So the thing that possesses the parts cannot be the same as its parts. Then we would have to say, like, instead of my body or my mind, or they're separate, like the body's body or the body's mind. But that doesn't make sense. So clearly the I is not the same as the aggregates for that reason also. So think about that. Is that true? Mm. So for those two reasons, is it, yeah, does it clear that the I, as it appears in the first step, existing from its own side, is not one with the aggregates? A third way to think is that in this step is that it's not findable anywhere within the aggregates. If we look through all the body, all the parts of the body, we can't find this I. And if we look through all the parts of the mind, can we find the I? Mm. And then the fourth step, that the I, analyzing to see whether the I is something different from the aggregates. And if the I exists as something inherently different from the aggregates, it can have no connection with them whatsoever. It has to exist completely independently. So if we, from the aggregates, completely separate and independently from the aggregates. So if we imagine putting our body and mind, the aggregates, the collection of body and mind, off to one side and look the other way, look somewhere else for the I. Is there anything we can find that we can point to and say, this is the I, completely separate from, inherently different from the aggregates? So if there's nothing else you can find that's inherently different from the aggregates, then the only logical conclusion is we've exhausted the set of the two possibilities, either inherently one with the aggregates or inherently different from the aggregates. So the only possible conclusion is that this I, which seemed to appear so clearly in the first step, it doesn't exist at all, anywhere. It's totally non-existent. The I existing from its own side, independently, a solid thing with its own inherent entity or nature, totally non-existent. Not one with the aggregates, not different from the aggregates. So try to immerse your mind in that recognition. of the emptiness of the person or I existing from its own side. Mm. And then finally, be aware though that it's not that the person doesn't exist at all. We're here meditating. The stream of consciousness is continuing to arise moment by moment. The body continues to function. The heart beats, blood flows. And we continue meditating and can, bring a conclusion to the meditation. So how does this person, the I, exist? As something merely imputed upon the body and mind. But when we search for, it's not findable. And yet, it exists and functions. It exists in dependence upon the body and the mind, not from its own side in the slightest. Mm. Okay, we don't have much time left, so bring a conclusion to your meditation. Anyway, I hope it's clear. It's clear now how to meditate like that. I wanted to point out, because I'm not sure, we didn't look at the readings very much for this course, but I just wanted to point out in the PDF packet of readings, there's this one. It's the longest of the teachings there. How to Meditate on Emptiness by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. It's very long and detailed. I think it's about 20. It's over like 25 pages long. But Rinpoche goes through all the points that we're talking about there. He spends a lot of time on what is the first point, and debates with one of the students about, is the I findable within the aggregates, on the aggregates, or different from them? With George Chornoff, he's debating a lot there. And how the I is merely labeled on the aggregates. But here you can see recognizing the refuting object or the object refutation. He speaks a lot about that. So that's a good resource if you want to do this meditation again. That's a good resource to use. Also, I was just to mention, how to use this meditation in practice, like in your daily life, is when, when afflictive emotions arise, when you see anger arises, then at that time, notice how the I appears. And then, if you can, maybe in that moment or shortly after, or the next time you meditate afterwards, check, where is that I? The I that's angry? Where is it? How does it exist? And it really diffuses the situation in your mind. It helps us, see very clearly how it's just a story we create and believe it as if it's not created by us. It just is reality. Or when we're attached, when we're jealous, or when we're afraid. Check when those times when the I arises very strongly, check how that I, where is it? Is it in the body? Is it in the mind? Outside of those? And then you can see it quickly breaks down the kind of concrete grasping of the situation. So it's very useful. Because I mean, the whole point, remember we started off by looking at we started off this module looking at this verse by Nagarjuna where he says, you know, um, the exhaustion of karma and afflictions is freedom or liberation. Where do those come from? From false concepts. False concepts arise from elaboration, which means grasping at inherent existence. Elaboration is ceased in emptiness. Right? The whole point of meditating on emptiness is to reduce the false concepts that grasp at things being good or bad, existing from their own side, which gives rise to, attachment to things we think are inherently good, aversion to things we grasp at being as inherently bad, and then that leads to afflictive emotions, and that results in suffering. So the whole point of this is to, eliminate suffering from the very root cause, the very deepest cause. There were two questions I was sent by email. One is, and I see, oh, one is, oh, if the person is empty, then what is it that goes from life to life, right? Yeah, the stream of consciousness goes from life to life, and the stream of consciousness, because our body doesn't go from life to life, right? But the mind, it's the mind. The stream of consciousness goes from life to life, and the person goes from life to life. But how does the person go from life to life? There's something merely labeled upon the stream of consciousness. Just like now, the person exists as something, I exist as something merely labeled upon the body and mind. Just, we don't need the body, right, for it to have a basis of imputation. Just the stream of consciousness unfolding moment by moment is after death through the bardo is the basis for imputing I. And to impute I doesn't mean we have to be thinking I. It's a very automatic kind of process, but yes.
Energetic. Is that um, is that consciousness beyond the body? Some maybe we don't know. Maybe we can't measure it, so we don't know, since that's how science thinks about things. But
Yeah, science is not very good at describing the mind.
no, it's
Historically, have a very bad track record because
yeah,
you can't measure it because they're looking for something, material,
right,
physical based, and you can't find that.
right, right. Okay. And with this consciousness comes karma
Yeah,
and baggage.
yeah. So that's the other big question. If the person is empty,
Right.
then how does karma transmitted like from life to life? Yeah, also because karma is something, it's, I mean, in short, it's a dependent arising, right? It's like, it's a kind of, yeah, the seeds of karma basically ride. I mean, here the different Buddhist schools differ, right? But the Prasangika school, the easier to understand is the mind only school, that the seeds of karma ride on the mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a subtle energy that rides on the mind. Because even the mind itself, it has a subtle energy, right? But this karma is like the seeds of potentiality that can produce future experience, mainly experience they produce, right?
Right.
Like kind of like memories
Mm-hmm.
in a way, similar. But according to Prasangika school, it's a bit more subtle. Like the karmic seeds ride not on the mind per se, but just in the continuum of the person. It's a bit more, yeah. But the person is just merely labeled. But the karmic seeds are also merely labeled. They don't exist from their own side. It's like when you engage in some action and that like, I don't know, let me think of I mean, yeah, we always use killing as an example, but it becomes a bit like, okay, think of something else. Um, mm, I don't know. Say like, you make some really, I don't know, find some stuff like make a painting, like a beautiful painting for Mother's Day and give to your mother, right? As a gift. Really go to some effort to make this nice gift, right? You put a lot of energy into that, no? And
Mhm.
thought and feeling, right? So you create this powerful kind of karma. And that energy then it kind of has its own, it's like just we can just look how it works in this life.
Right.
Like then like, maybe then later in life we have children, become a mother, and then our own child like gives a gift to us on Mother's Day. And that caused us to remember that gift we made, no?
Right.
But suddenly, because we did that as years ago as a child, we suddenly, as we remember that, we have a powerful experience of just remembering that. And why, like why? There's been some kind of energy that was carried in our
Mhm.
mind that then when it's triggered by us receiving a gift as a parent, then it triggers that energy to ripen as this experience with memories and feeling that goes with it. So that's karma's like that. It's like
Mhm.
we do something, a powerful action, or even an unpowerful action, and it plants a seed of energy in the mind, and that energy just rides in the mind. No?
Mhm.
And then and even from life to life, right? Because the
Mhm.
mind stream goes from life to life, just like the mind stream goes from years ago to the present, right?
Right.
Same way, yeah. It's just independent of the body. Whereas now in this life, it's dependent on the body, right?
Right.
Yeah. But you can see it's so fascinating to observe the mind, just how it unfolds from moment to moment. It's to me, I like the analogy of like a spring flowing from underground, because what's happening underground we can't see. It's a mystery.
Right.
But yet this water just keeps pouring out. Like where it comes from, like who knows? I mean, it's related to the rain and everything, of course, but the water is just emerging from the ground. So imagine the ground is like the present moment. And the emergence is like through time, our consciousness is just emerging. And it seems to have just its own inertia
Right.
that it just keeps emerging into the present moment and carrying all of these memories and things with it as it goes. Yeah. That was your first question. Oh, the second question was about how to. Oh, yeah. Now we're out of time actually, and people are looking sleepy online. If you all online people were here in person, I tell you, you wouldn't be looking sleepy. It's so exciting here. No, maybe we can talk after class about that, Rama. Your second question. Okay, let's dedicate. So thank you all so much. Sorry, there's not more of I don't know, a wrap up here, but yeah, I think we used the time wisely. Not so much, we didn't look at, a lot of text or so many different explanations related to emptiness. We tried to focus really on this particular way of meditating on emptiness, the 4-point analysis. And at the beginning of the course, we looked, in detail why it's so important and how, the grasping at an solidly existing I, how it is the basis for different afflictive emotions, right? So let's rejoice in your own efforts in the entire this entire module on emptiness, and the efforts of all the others in the class, all the other students, and the efforts of all those Leah and Max and all the staff here at Land of Medicine Buddha and Ocean of Compassion who made this possible. And all the lineage gurus from Shakyamuni Buddha through Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti down Lama Tsongkhapa to His Holiness Dalai Lama and all of our own teachers who made it possible for us to receive some explanation of these insights of the Buddha. And then all the countless other sentient beings who engage in virtuous actions. Yeah, and offer us so much kindness for us to be able to have, sustenance and shelter and employment and education and so forth. So with gratitude, then in brief, we dedicate for the well-being of all of these sentient beings, that they have every form of well-being and happiness up to full enlightenment. And that the environment also, the planet Earth and beyond, all environments where sentient beings dwell become like pure lands without the slightest cause of harm, or natural disasters, or fires, earthquakes, floods, and so forth, illness, and have every supportive condition full of peace and balance and harmony, clean water, air, earth, uh, and abundance of food and shelter for all. And then finally, may all sentient beings be free from every form of suffering, and especially the ignorance, grasping at inherently existent self of persons and self of phenomena. And may this ignorance be completely replaced by understanding of dependent arising, interdependence, and emptiness. And may the Buddha Dharma flourish, and especially Land of Medicine Buddha and Ocean of Compassion centers. May they be free of all obstacles and flourish in every way. And then bring to mind any other prayers you'd like to make. So may those prayers also be accomplished in accordance with your virtuous intentions. Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know about the next module of Discovering Buddhism. The next module is on Tantra, and Venerable Angie is going to teach that. But I don't know when it begins. I'm sure you're all signed up. You'll receive an email from someone. Yeah, I guess that's all. See you again somewhere, sometime.